So, Norse mythology. That's a topic I'm very often asked to cover. Well, I think mostly because I very different take on the whole concept than most people, and which is why I probably piss off most scholars and at least alleged believers. Let's give them that. The believers. Let's try and be respectable. Believers. Um, yeah. Well, the thing is that this is, to me, just far too complicated and big an issue to be taken lightly. First of all, we have very limited sources of information. We have rune stones, and we have a handful of accounts that other people wrote about the Norse during the golden age of the Norse expansion and later Norman and Varangian expansions. And yeah, most of those accounts weren't really favorable because a lot of people didn't like what did. So I don't know, perfectly nice, loving guys to me. But yeah, no, I'm kidding. I can see why. So we have those. We have a handful of rune stones. We have some artifacts, and mostly, I think we have more wealth to understand them in archaeology than writing. To be honest, because a lot of the writing is, especially the Icelandic sagas, they're accounts written after the fact. Some of it after Christianity had come in and become the religion and culture of the land. So obviously, we had to be at that time very careful not to stir up the status quo the church wanted to keep. So it's really difficult for people to document this and then for us to decipher it. So there's that, and but I don't think it's impossible to filter out remnants that might be Christian influence in those texts, but you just have to be very, very careful, and it's hard to know what you're doing because you don't have the experience of a people in a place over time, which made up the Norse view of the world and their mindset. So you don't really have that. So you have to really, really know the Christian mindset of the time to be able to see how that may have affected, and then what else. And well, ideally, you should know at least have some sense of what hardship, genuine, gritty hardship means in a life. And being against all odds with the forces of nature, literally trying to kill you every fucking day. You should have some sense of how that manifests itself inside a human being and then a group of people, an entire society, an entire culture. And it's not easy. It is absolutely not. For a modern human being with a modern perspective to walk into this time, this era. And another thing that we do know, especially when the Norse culture became prominent and started expanding, it was following the age of migrations, the 400s and 300s, 400s, and 500s. So the early, the Dark Age period, when basically the Roman Empire was crumbling, and there were all these wars and other like South Germanic tribes migrating across the continent, and the Huns and Avars and everybody coming in. All these things happening all over there, and trading routes closing down because land was being fucked. We're moving around a lot. So yeah, so it was a very hard time for Scandinavia and the Baltic region and the northern part of the Eurasian steppes, because yeah, northern European plains, so modern day northwestern Russia, which you cannot exclude. So yeah, it was a lot that fed into it, and people spent a whole bunch of time. All these different ethnicities. It was not just Norse speakers. There were Norse, Balts, Finns, Sami, Slavic, all these different tribal factions of different ethnicities fighting all across the region, raiding each other when they went short on resources, and it looked like they weren't going to survive the winter. It was a tough environment, and it's kind of a kill or be killed time, or do or die. So I think pretty much the culture that went into expansion, I think it pretty much just developed out of despair mostly. Um, but so, and hence the whole wartime thing. The war is the status quo, not peace. So, coexisting with the reality that war and imminent death is a status quo, how do you function within that? How build? And this culture for quite a time did so very successfully. It got out of it expanded around the world and opened up trade routes all over, really big time. Of course, as we know, not in the most peaceful of ways, but efficient ways. Uh, kind of you could suggest there may have been a Machiavellian approach to this, but yeah, there's a lot to learn. A lot of there's a lot of knowledge in that culture, even in the texts, and so then there's this question, well, whether it's just a typical European culture or European belief system. That is also something that I question to a large degree, and here's why. Because when you look into it, there are all these things that you see in there. They kind of mean something. So you have two races of gods. You have the Aesir and the Vanir. Two races of gods coming together may suggest two tribes coming together, and there's also genetically look at it's very much a suggestion that there may have been something to that, and not just two tribes, but repeatedly tribes coming together and coalitions coming together. So there's that, and you have all, of course, the dwarves and the giants and the land wights and all of these other mythical creatures, and all of that means something. There are qualities and elements to them, also to individual gods. There are character traits. And then what is that? He's the god of what? Or she's the goddess of what? So how does that and the character traits? Why are these character traits tied to that? What is the symbolism there? What is that? Gods or goddesses? Who are the parents? What are they gods of? What are their character traits? You have to really go through the entire genealogy, all these gods and mythical creatures, their names, their alternate names, the meanings of their names and alternate names. This is almost as if all of this has been written in code. You need to go through all of the code. So another thing that I see as different from other European belief systems is just the sheer. There seems to be way more shamanism, mythology, if you will. So it's, you have the seers. Well, you have druids in tradition, and you and other Indo-European belief systems, but there's the land plays a role. The spirits and the powers and creatures, hidden creatures of the land, play a role in a way that I find different, also on a level importance that I find different. A lot of other European, and there's also a huge connection with the Siberian steppes and the Samian continuous connection with interaction very far back. The more you study those cultures, and even what little of what we know about Mongolian culture and Tengri, the sky god, these, more you see potential links and similarities. it might be tied to the fact that these people for a long time started, but some of it might also come out of the fact that they're all Arctic or just below the Arctic Circle, so Arctic or just subarctic cultures. So they share a lot of the same geographical realities and having to deal with extreme weather conditions, scarcity, etc., etc. Not always getting the luxury of um, writing their own futures and destinies, if you will. You can't really plan ahead too much in the Arctic. That plays a role in during times like today when the world seems to be just the sheer magnitude of uncertainty seems to be growing in the world at large. There's a tremendous benefit, tremendous edge from understanding that, having that in your cultural background. So yeah, there are some of the Arctic cultures are going to have a lot of advantage in a culture that's going to be increasingly, or in a world that's going to be increasingly tense and uncertain, despite of what risks are obviously for the Arctic region and development, etc. These are highly adaptable people, and stuff to be learned there. Great lessons to be learned there. Yeah, so maybe we'll gradually dive into take on Norse mythology, and hopefully spark contributions from other scholars and something chip in. It's always a better conversation when you're really challenging the living daylights out of beautiful like that. I'm not one to take offense, so if you tell me I'm full of shit, I'm full of shit. Maybe to you. Maybe I'm full of shit to everybody. And then so be it. It is what it is as well. It doesn't harm anyone, does it? Well, hopefully not. Want to put something good out there. We'll hope. At any rate, that's it for now. That's a few things to take into account. Norse mythology, Norse culture, Norse expansion. So look at the little of what we know of the major clans. There are hidden secrets there as well. Reasons I'll disclose later.